In late December 2024, as the world's attention was fixed on economic turmoil and regional conflicts, a select group of American and Chinese officials gathered in Geneva for a summit that would remain shrouded in secrecy for months. A single clandestine meeting, hidden from the world's gaze, altered the fate of nations. By the way, if you are not already subscribed, please do subscribe to the channel to support what we do and help us keep digging into these hidden stories. Now let's get back to the video. The stakes were unprecedentedly high. Tensions between the United States and China had reached a boiling point, with both superpowers locked in a cycle of provocation and retaliation over issues ranging from Taiwan to cyber warfare. The immediate catalyst for the meeting was a series of cyber attacks that had crippled U.S. infrastructure. Ports, water utilities, and airports across the country had experienced mysterious outages and data breaches, with evidence pointing to sophisticated state-sponsored operations. For years, China had denied any involvement, dismissing American accusations as paranoia or attributing the attacks to rogue criminal outfits. But the December 2024 meeting would mark a dramatic shift in this narrative. The American delegation, led by senior officials from the outgoing Biden administration, arrived in Geneva under the strictest security protocols. Their Chinese counterparts, representing the highest echelons of Beijing's foreign policy apparatus, were equally circumspect. The venue itself, a discreet diplomatic compound on the outskirts of the city, was chosen for its privacy and neutrality. Here, away from the prying eyes of the media and intelligence agencies, the two sides could speak candidly. Inside the meeting room, the atmosphere was tense but purposeful. The Americans presented a dossier of evidence linking the recent cyber attacks to Chinese state actors. The Chinese delegation, after initial denials, made a stunning admission. For the first time, Chinese officials acknowledged their government's role in the cyber operations targeting U.S. infrastructure. The revelation sent shockwaves through the American team, who had not expected such candor. The Chinese explained that the attacks were a direct response to escalating U.S. support for Taiwan, including arms sales and military training for the island's defense forces. They argued that these actions constituted interference in China's internal affairs. The Americans countered that the cyber attacks endangered civilian lives and critical infrastructure, crossing a dangerous threshold that could spiral into open conflict. Both sides recognized the perilous trajectory of their relationship. A miscalculation could trigger a military confrontation with catastrophic consequences for the world. The Geneva meeting was not the first attempt at back-channel diplomacy between Washington and Beijing. Earlier, in May 2023, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi had met in Vienna to establish a strategic channel for dialogue. The Vienna talks, followed by meetings in Malta and Bangkok, had focused primarily on Taiwan, the most sensitive issue in U.S.-China relations. Beijing repeatedly warned that moves toward Taiwanese independence were a red line. Despite these warnings, the U.S. continued to deepen its engagement with Taipei, prompting Beijing to escalate its cyber campaign as a form of asymmetric retaliation. The December 2024 Geneva summit marked a turning point. For the first time, both sides laid their cards on the table, acknowledging the risks of their current path. The Chinese delegation's admission was not an act of contrition but a calculated move. By owning up to the cyber attacks, Beijing hoped to force Washington to reconsider its Taiwan policy and open a new phase of negotiation. The Americans, while alarmed by the scale of the cyber operations, saw an opportunity to de-escalate. They proposed a framework for mutual restraint. The U.S. would limit certain military activities near Taiwan, while China would halt its cyber offensives against American infrastructure. Discussions were fraught and progress was incremental. Both sides remained deeply suspicious of each other's intentions, and neither was willing to make unilateral concessions. Yet, the very act of talking, of acknowledging each other's core concerns, helped to stabilize the relationship, if only temporarily. The Geneva summit also touched on broader issues. The Americans raised concerns about Chinese support for Russia's war in Ukraine, while the Chinese criticized U.S. export controls on advanced technology. Both delegations agreed that, despite their rivalry, cooperation was possible in areas of mutual interest, such as climate change, narcotics control, and artificial intelligence risk management. The meeting concluded without a formal communiqué. Instead, both sides agreed to continue their dialogue through the established back-channel, with another meeting tentatively scheduled for mid-2025 in Beijing. News of the Geneva summit did not leak immediately. For weeks, only a handful of senior officials in Washington and Beijing knew the full extent of what had transpired. When details finally emerged in April 2025, the world was stunned. Analysts and commentators scrambled to assess the implications of China's unprecedented admission and the new diplomatic channel it had opened. The revelation forced a reckoning in Washington. Congressional hearings were convened to investigate the security lapses that had allowed the cyber attacks to succeed, and to debate the future of U.S. policy toward Taiwan. In Beijing, the leadership faced its own internal debates. Some hardliners argued that the admission of culpability was a sign of weakness, while pragmatists insisted it was a necessary step to avoid a disastrous confrontation. The Geneva summit also reverberated in Taipei. Taiwanese officials, long accustomed to being the focal point of superpower rivalry, now faced renewed uncertainty about the extent of American support. Internationally, the secret meeting was seen as a rare example of great power diplomacy averting disaster. The world's two most powerful nations had come to the brink, looked over the edge, and chosen dialogue over escalation. Yet, the underlying issues remained unresolved. The question of Taiwan's status continued to loom large, with Beijing insisting on eventual reunification and Washington maintaining its policy of strategic ambiguity. The cyber domain, too, remained a contested space. While the Geneva framework led to a temporary lull in attacks, both sides continued to invest heavily in offensive and defensive cyber capabilities. Despite these uncertainties, the Geneva meeting established a precedent for candid, high-level engagement between Washington and Beijing. It demonstrated that even in the darkest moments, diplomacy could offer a path forward. The secret summit also highlighted the importance of back-channel diplomacy in the modern era. With public opinion polarized and media scrutiny intense, leaders sometimes need space to negotiate away from the spotlight. Historians would later compare the Geneva summit to earlier moments of secret diplomacy, such as Henry Kissinger's covert trip to China in 1971, which paved the way for the normalization of U.S.-China relations. But the stakes in 2024 to 2025 were arguably even higher. The world was more interconnected, the risks more diffuse, and the consequences of miscalculation potentially catastrophic. In the months following the Geneva meeting, both Washington and Beijing took steps to institutionalize their dialogue. Military-to-military communications were restored, and new protocols were established to manage incidents in cyberspace and the South China Sea. The two sides also agreed to expand cooperation on climate change, with joint commitments to reduce carbon emissions and invest in renewable energy. On the economic front, the U.S. and China began consultations to renew their science and technology cooperation agreement, which had lapsed amid rising tensions. People-to-people exchanges, which had dwindled during the pandemic and subsequent diplomatic freeze, were gradually restored. Direct flights increased, and student visas were once again issued in greater numbers. Despite these positive developments, the relationship remained fundamentally competitive. Both sides continued to view each other as strategic rivals, and the risk of future crises could not be discounted. The Geneva summit did not resolve the core issues dividing the U.S. and China, but it did change the tone of their engagement, replacing confrontation with cautious dialogue. In Washington, the Biden administration's handling of the crisis was both praised and criticized. Some saw the willingness to talk as a sign of strength. Others accused the administration of appeasement. In Beijing, President Xi Jinping used the summit to reinforce his image as a statesman capable of managing China's rise without triggering conflict with the West. The world watched closely as the two powers navigated the aftermath of the secret meeting. Markets responded with cautious optimism, while allies and partners sought reassurances about the durability of American commitments. The Geneva summit also had ripple effects beyond the U.S.-China relationship. Other countries, from the European Union to Southeast Asian nations, welcomed the reduction in tensions and called for similar diplomatic initiatives in their own regions. Yet, the specter of Taiwan continued to haunt the relationship. Beijing's insistence on reunification clashed with growing support for Taiwanese autonomy, both in the US and among other democracies. Cybersecurity, too, remained a persistent challenge. While the Geneva framework reduced the frequency of attacks, both sides knew that the underlying capabilities and the temptation to use them remained. The secret meeting in Geneva was not a panacea. It was, however, a vital reminder of the power of diplomacy to prevent catastrophe, even in an age of rapid technological change and geopolitical rivalry. As 2025 unfolded, the world remained on edge, but the immediate crisis had been averted. The lessons of Geneva would shape the next phase of US-China relations, for better or worse. In the end, the true significance of the secret meeting lay not in what was agreed, but in the willingness of both sides to acknowledge the risks and responsibilities of great power competition. The story of the Geneva summit would be told and retold for years to come, a testament to the enduring importance of dialogue, even when conducted in the shadows. For the officials who participated, the experience was both sobering and inspiring. They had glimpsed the abyss and chosen to step back. The world, for now, had been given a reprieve, but the underlying currents of rivalry and mistrust would continue to shape the international order. The Geneva summit stands as a case study in the challenges and possibilities of 21st century diplomacy. It showed that even in an era of polarization and mistrust, dialogue remains possible and essential. As new crises emerge and old ones persist, the lessons of Geneva will remain relevant. The world's future may well depend on the willingness of its leaders to meet, in secret if necessary, and to talk. The secret meeting that changed the course of a nation and perhaps the world remains a powerful reminder of the fragile peace that underpins our interconnected age. In the end, it was not the agreements themselves, but the act of engagement that made all the difference. For those who seek to understand the dynamics of power in the 21st century, the Geneva summit offers both a warning and a hope. A warning that rivalry, if left unchecked, can lead to disaster, and a hope that even the deepest divisions can be bridged through honest dialogue. As the world awaits the next chapter in this unfolding story, one lesson is clear: diplomacy, even in its most secretive forms, remains humanity's best hope for peace. If you made it this far, thanks for watching, and subscribe to the channel for more stories they don't want you to know, that go into interesting topics like this one.